Good morning, everybody. My name is Jack O'Connor. I'm the Title I Director from the state of Montana, and I would like to welcome you to this opening session. What do good magicians and great teachers have in common? They both know how to trick the brain, which is going to be presented by Garner. Katie is an internationally known speaker, author, and literacy consultant whose published work on reading and the brain has gained national recognition with the No Child Left Behind, Reading First, and RTI initiatives. As a keynote featured conference speaker, Katie provides cutting-edge strategies for aligning existing literacy instruction with current brain research. Through lecture and panel discussion at both Harvard and MIT, as well as through her work in classrooms around the country, Katie shifts existing paradigms associated with early literacy learning. Her backdoor approach to skill mastery is also the focus of an ongoing keynote series with literacy leaders, Dr. Richard Ellington and Dr. Ann Cunningham at the Vulnerable Readers Summits across the US and Canada through 2017. Please help me in welcoming Katie Garner.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here, and I'm actually only nervous about one thing, and that is making sure that I can jam-pack every single thing that I know I want to get into your hands into this hour. So that is the only thing that I'm trepidatious about. And to do that, I am going to speak at a pretty quick clip, just to really make sure that we can get into both ends of what I think is such an important thing, especially for those of us that are in the classroom, which are not just the what to do, but the why to do it. Because if you know what the magic is that's behind the scenes of what we do that works versus what we do that kind of works, but maybe we need to make it better, stronger, faster. If you know why you're doing what you're doing, then you can tweak it and really make it your own and mix it with what you already do that's so golden with your kids and get that extra power out of it. So to cover both of those ends, not just the how, but the why, we're going to be kind of ping-ponging back and forth in this content area that is the code. And the code, whether you work with early grades or whether you work with older students, it is the bridge everybody has to cross to learn and to live. You have to be able to read to learn and write to communicate. And to do that, you have to have absolute ownership of this thing called the code. Now, if you teach in an early grade, the code is the bridge that you live on. So you're not just using it as a bridge to get to what you need to do. Like if you're in third, fourth, or fifth, you can't read to learn if you can't read. So if you got kids that are still trying to learn to read, which is supposed to be what happens in K1-2. We learn to read in K1-2 so that we're ready to read to learn 3, 4, 5, and on. But we know we've got a ton of kids in third grade stuck on the hump. So they're trying to learn to read and read to learn at the same time. And you can't do both at the same time. It's like someone handing you a basketball and sending you off to a football field. You just can't play basketball with a football. And that's how it feels if you're trying to figure out what a word is when you're supposed to be inferring the irony and noticing the humor. Your brain doesn't process both of those things in the same place, and it can't do them simultaneously. So this being stuck on this hump between learning to read and reading to learn, that's where the bridge changes, because in K1-2, we're building the bridge. We can spend all day on the bridge. We're reading and writing across the curriculum. Curriculum is those are just the playgrounds that we get to enjoy as readers and writers. We're building up our reading in math. We're building up our writing in social studies. I mean, reading and writing is the focus. We're just using these different content areas to play with those skills, to build strength. In third, fourth, fifth, and onward, you got to get across the bridge, because the stuff you got to do is on the other side of the bridge. So if you get stuck on the bridge, or if you have to carry Johnny across the bridge every time you have to get him to understand the math problem or help him put together a persuasive argument and he can't read the informational text, that's where it can be a real problem, because the bridge isn't built, but all the things you're going to be focusing on for your assessment are over here. So it's hard to figure out how to get back and work with what's missing here when your gut tells you you need to be focusing on what the assessment's going to hit, which is over there. So it just kind of gets to be a bigger and bigger and bigger mess the longer it's left in ill repair. So this is where we're going to look at some really, truly magical ways that we can shift what we're doing and get completely different results. And that's what I love about the brain science, is it really can seem magical, because when you mess with the brain, when you do things and use the brain almost like a chess opponent, or you look at it like a chess opponent that you can either work against or align with. And a lot of it's predicting what its next move is, and the brain science really gives us that insight. So then we can do things we never would have thought to do that put us in a completely different position and put our kids in a completely different boat. So the title of this is, what do good magicians and great teachers have in common? The one thing I want to draw your attention to, raise your hand if you teach an early grade, like kinder or first. Okay, I have to tell you this because this is going to save months of time. There's something called the Better alphabet. It's probably incorrect to call it a song because it's not a song in that you sing it the same way and kids go on autopilot. It actually cheats what the problem with a song is, which is kids can sing the whole thing, but then they can't pull information out of it or twist it around. You know when you sing the 12 months of the year, and you say what comes before July? They can't just tell you, they have to sing the whole thing. And then if they skip the part that they're supposed to listen to, then they have to sing it all over again. It's a read-only disc, and there's a reason for that. You can get around that if you start it over on every grouping of information you want them to have. So in a nutshell, what I will just tell you is the reason I put this in this window, it serves two purposes. One is to let you know it exists because it will knock out your individual letter sounds in 2 weeks to 2 months. So at the 2-week mark, half of your class will be done with them. At the 2-month mark, the rest of your class will be done with them. But along the way, they'll have 12, 15, 18, 21. And everything they have under their belt lets them bring more to the table as a reader-writer. So from that search box, you can then look for things that you want to find, like, for instance, this Better alphabet. If you type that in, you will see video clips of me showing you exactly how to do it, what it looks like. You'll see kids doing it. It takes about 2 minutes. You do it twice a day, every day. And at 2 weeks, they'll have far more than you would have 3/4 of your year if you're doing letter of the week. And that's just the beginning. That's just the beginning of the cake that we're going to build. So I just mentioned that for those early grade teachers to keep that in the back of their mind. You know, we got to face it. At the end of the day, you can't do much with individual letter sounds. You really can't. I mean, if I want to write about my pet mouse, I could scan the alphabet train all day long, and I'm never going to find the letter that says ow, because it's not up there. So I'm going to have to probably divert and write about a dog. Now, I don't have a dog. I have a mouse. We just bought one at Walmart last weekend, and I'm excited to tell you about my mouse. But I won't be able to do that officially or formally until 2nd grade, because that's when the OUOW is going to show up on the scope and sequence, which is a shame because my mouse will be dead by then. I want to write about my mouse today when I'm excited because I just bought him. I don't even have a dog. I have no interest in sitting here and engaging with text to tell you about a dog I don't have. But I do have words on the word wall that I could use. I have dog on the word wall. Big. Very much. I like my dog very much. He is big. He is really big. He is so big. I really like my dog. And then I'm going to go do whatever the center is because I'm not going to be pulled or anchored to this text activity because I'm not really able to say what I want. I want to use the sounds I need to write the words and the stories I want to tell. You know, I want what I need to pick up the book that I want to read. And a scope and sequence that's going to limit my access to this thing called the code makes that very difficult because how do they know what sounds I need? I need the sounds and the words I want to use that are in the books that I want to read or write. So chopping the code up into 3 pieces makes that very, very difficult. So all of that to say, individual letters and sounds don't get much bang for their buck. So we want to knock those out fast, and while that's happening, get some instructional density by filling in more with something that we're going to be talking about as we move forward. Now, again, what do good magicians and great teachers have in common? They both know how to trick the brain. Good magicians know how to take full advantage of the brain's hardwired processes for attention. That's why it looks like they perform magic. Great teachers can make use of these same hardwired strategies to accelerate learning. And the more we learn about the brain, the more we can see these backdoors to get through things that normally would take up a year or 2 years or 3 years, and we can shoot right through them in two or three sittings. It's actually a phenomenal shift, and specifically in the areas that are our biggest obstacles. You know, certain things just defy everything when it comes to how the brain learns, and one of those things is the code. You know, letters just seem to do what they do. Phonics is there, but phonics does not explain why a K says K. Why does a K say K? Because it does. It just does. It just is. How do you know? You just have to do it. The more you do it, the more you'll know. If you read at home, that'll help. If you write at home, that'll help. If your parents know what a K says, that'll help. But if your parents don't know what a K says, or they come from a different language background, or you don't have books at home, it's going to take you a lot longer to remember why things do what they do when they just do it. There's no logical scientific explanation to really sink your teeth into, and that's a very big challenge then to give these skills to kids who aren't going to get that use it time they need to own it. And it's the beginning of this unlevel playing field. So teachers can use this magic, the hardwired processes of the brain, to accelerate areas of learning that are usually the biggest obstacles that teachers might face when it comes to something, for instance, like the code, that just defies everything about the brain and the way that it learns. The power of the brain science is really the key, understanding how to work with the brain instead of against it. And I think that's why I like this content, which is the code, because it's in such total opposition to how we learn in terms of just the makeup of it, the nature of the beast, that when we shift it even a little, let alone 180 degrees, we get a completely different outcome. So it's the most perfect area to see a significant change. Now, having said that, though, the gap between what we know and what we do is very, very wide. And it continues to be wide, especially when it comes to what we know about the brain and how to teach kids to read. One of the things I wanted to share before I jump back to something that Dr. Shanahan mentions is a slide from Dr. Allington's presentation. I do a keynote series with Dr. Richard Allington and Ann Cunningham. There are a few other North American literacy leaders who are my personal mentors, just because I look up to them so much, and they've done so many things that have opened doors for where we can see where we're headed. Now, they're not looking at the brain science as much as the state of the union of where we sit when it comes to literacy. So my job is to be like the Jed Clampett of the group, because my focus is really in the classroom with kids. So I'm thinking what this looks like with Johnny, and they're giving information that you can take and really run with for that purpose. But it's a great state of the union for literacy. And this looks like very complex data, which I'm kidding because it's totally not complex data, but it gives us a good insight into something that we don't think about, even though it seems like it's common sense. There are basically three kinds of kids, and if you've taught in a classroom, you know this. There are kids that are easy to teach to read. There are kids that are hard to teach to read, and then there are kids that are very hard to teach to read. Now, we all understand this because we live this if we're in the classroom. Now, what's interesting that we don't understand or even appreciate, because we take for granted that what we're doing is that it's as hard as it is. So we don't give ourselves, I don't think, enough credit for trying to get around an elephant that's in our way, which is what causes this to look the way that it does. When we look at K2 effectiveness to actually consistently get kids reading, and this is Dick's slide as well, but it comes from a 5-year study, Stuhlman and Panada's study. And it was a very in-depth study, multiple schools in multiple states and across a long period of time. 25% of teachers are able to teach almost everyone to read, and they make virtually no referrals or retentions. 50% are only able to teach those in the easy-to-teach group, and they're responsible for about 25% of all referrals and retentions. 25% are able to teach almost no one to read and are responsible for approximately 75% of all referrals and retentions. Now, I would probably put myself in this middle group when I was teaching without knowledge of the brain science. Because when I went to college, nobody told me how to teach Johnny to read, ever. They told me different ways to think about how we might want to teach Johnny to read, because I went to school in the day of the philosophies, where there were the wars about what to do, what not to do, and one professor thought you should do this, and another professor said that was horrible, and you need to do that. So you were just kind of stuck in the middle of this badminton game, and you didn't know which way to turn until you got locked in a room with 30 kids of your own, and you just kind of roll up your sleeves, and you do a lot of trial and error, and you try to figure it out, and then you think something's working, and it might with that kid, with that class, with those parents, but then the next year you do exactly the same thing and you're not getting anywhere. And then the next year you do it and you modify it a little bit, and then you're getting kind of where you were, but not where you were the first year, but better than you were the second. So it's like this recipe where you just keep trying to throw different things in and kind of see what works as you go. The brain science has made this a completely different process, because we can see on an MRI what the instruction is doing and what it's not, and what areas are engaging and what areas aren't. And the more areas of engagement and the more widespread those areas are, the deeper the learning is, which means the more entrenched it is, so they won't just disappear. Over summer slide won't just knock it right out. Despite this overwhelming research, many early grade teachers and professors still cling to this random assortment of mixed methods. Now again, the research cuts a clear path as to what works, what doesn't, how to make it bigger, stronger, faster, what to kind of shove away, what's really golden within that piece that we already know instinctually is really making a difference. Again, Dr. Shanahan, without clear purchase on what it takes to become a good reader, and what some kids might be missing, their instructional successes will be unfortunate accidents. Fortunate accidents. The same can be said for the professors who teach them, as well as the principals and coaches who supervise them. And I know when I was in the classroom, that is how I felt. When I really had things that worked, the hard part was remembering, what did I put in that recipe? Like, okay, I did what I kind of did last year, but I did it a little differently this year, and boy, it worked. But now, how do I replicate that next year? And again, different things, different kids, different years, different home situation. These skills are very use it or lose it driven, because when you don't have logic to understand something, you have to memorize it. Memorize it meaning do it often. Sight words, how do you learn sight words? You read. Kids who don't read over the summer, there are some states where kinders have to memorize 200 sight words. Well, that's great till summer comes and some have no books at home. So if you don't see sight words over the summer, you lose 100 of them or more. So the next year's teacher inherits a kid that is supposed to have all this under their belt, and they did by the skin of their teeth the last year. But if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. So the unlevel playing field that just naturally will come from that is unavoidable, unless we can find a way to put meaning back where right now there isn't. Meaning offers us a different path to get to those skills in a different way. And that path is much wider and much more accommodating to all of our students. It's not as narrow as the one that puts us on this path. What really matters is early, intensive, and expert literacy instruction at the earliest grade levels. Teacher expertise is the most critical variable in effective reading instruction. Doesn't even matter what program you have in place. It's the teacher's ability to play with it, to be responsive to it, to know their audience. It's not a Broadway show. You know, you're not going to do Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and then give the test. You've got to be ready to do Act 1 and then maybe go back to Scene 3 and then strip that apart and jump to the finale because that's got something in it that's going to help them with Act 2, and then put a kid on the stage you didn't even think about because you found out he could sing. You know, I mean, you've got to be a completely flexible, in-the-moment teacher when it comes to reading to really know where the nooks and crannies are that you need to get into, and then you need to be able to pull tools that you know are consistently effective to work with those kids. So that's really the goal. Research shows professional development for pre-K2 teachers produces greater gains than any one-on-one tutoring, resource intervention, retention combined. Now, how do we get this? Because this is what I didn't feel like I had. And I taught all the early grade levels. The code. Teaching phonics is just not intuitive. You could be the best teacher in the world, the most creative teacher. You stay up nights planning lessons. It's not intuitive to teach someone something that makes no sense. There's no way to teach someone what a case is. You can do lots of activities. You can make kangaroos and kites. You can do, but you're not actually able to give them the knowledge because there's nothing for them to say, oh, I get it. It's a matter of you breaking through the use it or lose it cycle for them. And we all have a different threshold for what we have to use, how many times we have to use something to keep it. Some kids have to use it a lot. Some kids might have to use it more than you could provide if their only use it time is in the classroom. They might need use it time 10 times more than another kid who could see it twice and they've got it. So a lot of times the question is, are you able to provide that use it time? And if you're the third grade teacher and they're at a first grade level, how much use it time can you provide on first grade skills in a third grade classroom, preparing for a third grade assessment? So the window of use it time closes as they get farther away from the skill level they're on, because they all of a sudden find themselves in a fourth grade classroom, but they read at a first grade level. So the only use it time they have maybe for first grade skills is if your volunteer shows up 1.5 hours a week, because you can't leave your 25 fourth graders to go work on first grade skills. They're going to get them as you can kind of toss them out in the context of fourth grade text, fourth grade math, fourth grade science. I mean, that's going to be it's going to make it even more difficult than he had to struggle with in second, first, and so on. Teaching phonics is not intuitive. Most teachers in early grade classes today have received little to no training on how to do it effectively, leaving them ill-prepared and ill-equipped. And I would also argue that once you've learned phonics, then you're stuck with another challenge. How the heck do I make this make sense to a 5-year-old who wants to lick their shoe and eat the carpet? Because to learn phonics, you have to put all of your faculties at high-level functioning. It is hard stuff, and it is all abstract. There's nothing you can hold. You know, in kinder and first, we eat our way through the math curriculum. We don't talk about subtraction until we've taken 3 cookies and eaten 2. We show them. You can't do that. In a third, fourth, and fifth, they're more flexible with this abstract thinking. Third, fourth, and fifth graders have a base of knowledge that we've kind of built at the early grades, so they can put a long division problem on the board, and kids can kind of get an idea of 300 looks different than 3. You can't eat your way through long division in third or fourth grade. But we can happily eat our way through our entire math curriculum in the early grades because we're working with concrete level thinkers. But the code is not concrete, it's abstract. So even once you wrap your head around it, then you have to develop some expertise plan to get it into their heads, or just even get the attention long enough to try to do that. So it's a real double whammy, and this is part of how we end up in those reading wars, where we just keep going back and forth to the least of the evils, which way to go. And I really do think balanced literacy is the key. I think phonics is the huge piece of that puzzle, but it's patterns in context. The brain requires meaning. It has a need-to-know basis for survival. That's why you didn't get eaten by a dinosaur. If you heard a noise, you gave it your focused attention, you had a need to know, and that drives your learning. That marks information for memory in the brain when it's coming to you on a need to know basis. But you have to have patterns to make sense of things. That's how we think. It's the brain's way of doing things. So patterns in context of meaning is the absolute ideal. But balanced literacy can become very flexible if you don't feel confident and feel as though you have expertise in all of the areas that make that up, especially this piece that I see as the biggest part of that puzzle, which is the code. So here's part of why it is so difficult. Letters and sounds behave like kids. They do a great job when they can't get a hold of each other. You know, when letters are up on a board or on a wall, like above your alphabet train, and they're separated by about 3 inches from one another, they're perfectly behaved. They do just what they should. Abaca, effaga, ha'ijaka, ulmanapa. The problems happen when those letters get together, just like kids. When those letters get together, all new behaviors come out and anything goes. Not anything goes, but to a kid who's trying to make sense of the alphabet, it looks like anything goes, because they are told at the earliest levels that Y says yeah. We even sing a song, Y says yo, yo, yeah, yeah, yeah. Then you march to your calendar 2 feet away, and you show them words like July, and May, and Sunday. You show them the sign above the B-oi's bathroom. You read them books that are B-I, this author. So they see that letter Y saying E, saying I, saying A, saying oi. To them, it seems like it can just do whatever it wants. And the only thing, though, that will be on the assessment is Y says yeah. Now, to be frank, the only thing you can actually be sure Y won't do is say yeah. Because in the odds of things, if you're in Las Vegas, unless the words yellow, yes, you, or yak, you'd have a hard time in a print-rich environment in K2 when kids are starting to learn these things, ever seeing Y say yeah. Other than yellow, yes, you, yak, it's almost not going to happen. Our favorite words are candy, mommy, daddy. And then everything the calendar has on it. I mean, it's very difficult to teach a skill that you're unreinforcing all day long. And that's just one example. We say T says T, but it doesn't. It really doesn't. Because pick up any book, look at any page, every single line after line after line. T is there, but T is with H. And when T and H get together, it's now we know there's a T there, or H there, and that's why. Kids don't know that. All kids know, because they don't learn TH until first grade. First grade is when that appears on their scope and sequence. All they know is there's the letter. It's supposed to say T. It doesn't. Why? Words like this, they, them, those, the, outnumber words like turtle, or trotting, or Toronto, 10 to 1. So it's so hard to reinforce something that never seems to happen to a kid. And the reason we're unreinforcing it is we're never working with letters in isolation. We're working with letters in actual words. Now, if you work with upper grade learners, middle school learners, 5th graders, high school students, these are those core skills between the individual letter sounds and actually reading are all those parts of the code that they have holes. They have these gaping holes. Being able to plug those instantly is as important as giving kids early access to as much of the code as possible. Because you really can't do much with text if you don't have the whole code. It doesn't help to have 1/3 of the code or 2/3 of the code. And we do spread this across 3 grade levels, which makes it really difficult to get the most bang for the buck when you're reading and writing across the instructional day. The more you bring to the table, the more value you can take away. Dick Allington likes to say that 3 to 4 years is just too long to make learners wait for the whole code. And because we do chop these skills up and divvy them out in kinder, 1st, and 2nd so that 3rd grade's ready to read to learn, that means if you miss the boat during those years, you're kind of out of luck when you're in 6th grade or 7th grade or 8th grade because you got one shot at it. And if you didn't pick up your digraphs or your diphthongs or your R-colored vowels, then you just go on without those parts of the code. It's like being stuck in life as a Morse code operator and you're missing 2/3 of the code. You're trying to make sense of clicks and taps and you can only recognize 1/3 of them. So the rest of them you just have to kind of work your way around. That's a terrible way to have to go through life. And for kids who don't have that level of literacy, that's how they'll have to go through life. Teachers as well become less comfortable with how to work with these holes as they go up higher into the grade levels because that's not their expertise, it's not their focus. Now what's nice is it can be in a very simple way, again if we take this backdoor cheating route. So even if you work in upper grades, have no idea what phonics even is, you'll be able to take this and run with it as if it shifts what it is to what you need, which is a way to make it make sense to that learner. in an instantly quick way so that you're cutting out the learning curve of repetitious practice. Your practice is to use it to read, to use it to write. That's where we're headed. We're going to do this by shifting our instruction from brain antagonistic to brain compatible, because this content is the definitive example, the code of brain antagonistic. It just tweaks and teases the brain at every turn. Now, here's what this looks like when we start to shift things in a way that changes and that makes sense, and in a way the brain likes. Imagine it is the first day of school. Imagine you've got a little guy, he's got a note pinned to his chest from mom. It says he's gifted. I'm going to put this example down to kindergarten just because they don't know anything in kindergarten, so it's a great blank slate. If you've got a 7th grader who just came in, doesn't speak English, or if you've got a 4th grader with so many holes you don't even know where to start. So you can't get a bigger hole than kindergarten. They don't know who they are, they don't know where they are, they're just lost in space. So this little guy's got his note pinned to his chest. Now we have to assess informally whether he actually is gifted or not. So, and we can't really know for sure, but we have to call mom. So we ask him if he can tell us what month it is, and he does a great job. He looks up here and he goes, August. Now, that was a very reasonable way to attack that word, because he didn't do anything wrong. There's just obviously a pattern he doesn't know yet. So when we tell him, that's great, awesome. You know what? I love the way you tried to read that word. You're a smart little kid. Now, actually, the word's August, but way to go. Great job. Now, he actually is gifted because he immediately says what the brain would say in this situation if it's analyzing things, which is why? Why? I don't get why is it August? Because A goes and it goes A, U goes and it goes U, but O is what goes There's no O in this word. Why is it August? That's a very logical argument. He laid out on a platter everything he expected to see these letters do. I'm saying it does something totally different. He just wants me to account for that discrepancy. That's the way the brain thinks. If not this, then what? What's the next most logical thing? Give me something so that I can go, oh, that's what he's looking to do. He's looking to bridge the gap between what he knows and what I said it's supposed to look like, because right now they don't fit. So this why is what we want. This is real critical thinking in real time. It's what we actually forge instruction around to get problem-solving juices flowing, to really get them digging into something at a deeper level. So we want that. The problem is we often have to say things like, it just is, it just does, you just have to remember. Because a lot of times that is the case. Even if you tell him the phonics pattern, what about when he sees the word father? Hey, you said A-U-A-W is supposed to go but the word father doesn't have a U or W, so how come it says Yeah, it just does. You just have to remember. So even with phonics, it feels like you're still always trying to tell them how to spell a word that doesn't sound the way it looks like it should, or how to pronounce a word that doesn't actually pronounce the way that it's spelled. And that's where you're telling the brain to stop patterning, stop thinking, just memorize it. Just do it enough and it'll sink in. Now for the kids who do it enough, it will. For the kids who only do it when they're with you in the classroom, it maybe won't. And for a lot of kids, it doesn't. And that's why we have so many kids that can't read well enough to get jobs. So we don't want to have to say this. This is why we're in the track that we're on. So much easier to tell them, you know what, Johnny, actually, I love that you just asked me this question. There's a reason you can't read this word. There's a grown-up, now I'm going to pull a whole bunch of different brain strategies in here that I'm going to talk about in a second. There's a grown-up secret in this word. It's actually a reading-writing secret. Anytime letters don't do what they should, see, when letters get together and don't do what they should, there are reasons why. The problem is they're secrets, and they're grown-up secrets, and they're big secrets. So if I tell you one that your brain's not ready for, your brain could explode. Now, if you really do teach kinder, don't say that. You'll set your criers back off again. But there's a significant motivational factor with that, which is you're turning the tables on these skills to, instead of you're chasing them and telling them they need to be listening, this is not OUOW, you're on the wrong page. We're on the AUAW page. You're on the EUEW page. We're not even going to do that until tomorrow. Guys, I'm going to give you a test on Friday. If you're not paying attention, you're going to flunk it, because you know what? I'm going to mix all these up, and then you're going to have to tell me which one says what and what word. And if you can't, you won't be a reader. And if you're not a reader, you won't get a job. So I suggest everybody get on page 16. Now, right now. Now, we may not do it that way, but the kids know these skills are important to us, and we're the ones who want them to pay attention, and it's boring stuff. They don't care why letters do this versus that. They just want to use those letters to make words to read the book about the baseball star, to write the story about the ballerina. This is all a means to an end. The value isn't in, oh, I know a K. There's nothing exciting about that. What's exciting is when you own enough of it that you can actually kind of use those tools to plow through text and enjoy learning something or getting something out of what is otherwise just symbols. So that's why the exploding brain, because now I've turned the tables so that I've got it, you want it. I'll decide if you can have it, but you know what? It's big. I don't know. No promises. Never told a kindergarten class this before. Never even told my first graders this one. So you've got rapt attention now. You've got kids who don't even know what you're talking about looking at you like they can't wait to hear what you're going to say, even though they don't even know what you're talking about. Only Johnny knows what you're talking about. But the rest of them now are all tuned in because there's a secret and they don't want to miss it. Now that is a critical component of brain-based teaching, and it is fostering this need to know. Making something, and here's the thing, if you've got a kid who's intellectually curious, he's already got a need to know. Johnny had a need to know, because he knew enough to know something wasn't right, and he wanted to get to the bottom of it. That's great for Johnny. The problem is, how do you get a need to know in kids who don't need to know? You know, ignorance is bliss. If you don't know what you don't know, you're fine with the world. Like people that don't like to watch the news, they're happy because they don't watch the news. So they're not concerned about stuff that if you know something, you're going to be worried about it because this only leads to that, and then your brain starts to wander. So the trick is, if need to know is like, and it is like putting a catcher's mitt in place in the brain. When you teach to a need to know, you are tossing something out that a learner's ready to catch. They've got a place, a file folder already open because they asked for it, which means there's a connection already pre-built. When you toss something out to someone who doesn't know what you're talking about, they're not expecting it, they're not even interested, it's like throwing a ball to an empty field. They're just going, whoa, what was that? I don't know what it is. I almost had to learn it, but it didn't hit me, luckily. You know, you don't want to waste your breath tossing out balls when there's no one there to catch them. But if you have kids who don't have a need to know, how do you get this so important need to know? And secrets are just an easy way to do it. Secrets make them important. Everybody wants to know one. That's why now everybody's looking at me like this. Even though half the kids wouldn't know a letter from a shoe from a squirrel, they're staring at me and they're as excited as Johnny is to find out what I'm about to say, which is that there are 2 letters in this word August that are in love. Now, they're actually A and U, but they're not the only letters in love. A and W are in love too. And anytime these letters have to stand right up against each other in a word, they get so embarrassed that they always put their heads down and go, ah. Now watch my body gesture, my vocal inflection. There's a purpose for that. Ah. Look, guys, look at all the words that have that ah sound. Look, this word awful, or look at this word over here, awesome. Look at his name tag, Austin. Look at all the words that have this grown-up reading and writing secret. Now, if you didn't know the secret, you'd think this word's awful, or you'd think that word's awesome, or his name's Austin. But see, now you know the grown-up reading and writing secret. Now, Johnny gets to do what is this, and I'll tell you actually, I'm going to hold this part off because I want to mention this. This is instructional density, by the way. And I mention this because it's something you're going to see as a resonating theme throughout this before I tell you what Johnny gets to do. Instructional density, one of the best definitions I've heard of it is when you know your stuff, you know who you're stuffing, and you stuff every minute of every lesson. Torgensen, that's a quote from Torgensen. I can't remember his first name. But I love that philosophy. Know your stuff, know who you're stuffing, and stuff every minute into every lesson. Instructional density means how much bang for the buck are you getting out of this little 5-minute period. Well, we're doing the calendar right now. But I'm also tossing out something that to Johnny is going to be critical, and you'll see where it falls on the kids who don't know the letter from the number from the squirrel in just a second. To Johnny, what this does is it gives him a nice big brain burp because he gets to go, ah! He got to take this in the way the brain learns, which is if not, then this. You know, our brain learns on a hierarchy of likelihood. I'm going to park here. If I can't park there, I'll have to park back here. If I can't get a spot there, I'm going to have to go around and park on this side. I want a ham sandwich, but if they don't have one, just give me turkey. Oh, they don't have turkey? All right, just give me peanut butter. They don't even have that? All right, then I don't even want a sandwich. So we have this hierarchy, most likely, next most likely, if all else fails. That's the way the brain learns. It doesn't learn as letter's supposed to do this. If it doesn't, I don't know. I'll memorize it. It's always a patterning system. So this makes sense because now Johnny can understand, here's what it should do, but if it's not, here's what's probably going on. And that's critical because we want to align the way we teach with the way the brain learns. And this decision-making framework is critical thinking. It's diagnostic thinking. It's critical analysis. It's moving your way through your options. And that way we're feeding the brain instead of fighting it. Now, Johnny's not the important person here. Lulu is. Lulu was licking the carpet and playing with her shoe until she heard me say there was a secret. And then all of a sudden, I got her as excited as I had Johnny. The brain loves novelty. And the best example, actually, I can use for Lulu is I was doing a workshop at a school district. And I was working with K2 in the morning and 3rd through 5th in the afternoon. And in that 3rd through 5th group, a teacher brought her daughter because it was summer. I don't think she had childcare. And her daughter wasn't even 4. Like she either she just turned 4 or she was just ready to turn 4. So she was on her mom's phone the whole time, very well behaved, just playing a game. She only looked up one time. And that was when she heard me go, ah. And she looked up because she had a need to know. And her need to know is, what the heck is she doing? That's a need to know. If you have an extreme body gesture or a vocal inflection, anything that comes out of the norm, you get automatic attention. And it's not just regular attention, it's need to know attention. It's prioritized learning. That's part of our survival mechanism. That's how you didn't get eaten by the dinosaur. You heard a strange noise outside of your cave and you tuned in because it mattered. You get a different level of attention. It's actually the type of attention that marks information for memory in the brain. When you're getting information on a need-to-know basis, that information is prioritized in the brain in a different way than stuff you're just told when you're not really expecting it and you don't really have a need to hear it. So we want this prioritized learning clicked on, even for learners who don't necessarily bring to the table what they would need to know that. We want it on for everybody. So she heard me say this, she tuned in, she looked at me for just a second, long enough to make sure I wasn't totally crazy, and then she just looked back down and played with the phone. So we took a break. About an hour later, we came back, and I went up to this little girl and I said, could you tell me what these letters say? And her mom jumped in and said, oh, she's just 4. She just turned 4. We haven't done any letters, or she knows her name, but we haven't. I said, this is just an experiment. That's okay. I said, can you tell me what these letters say? And the little girl goes, ah. Now, she doesn't know what these letters are. Like, she doesn't have a use yet for using these to read and to write. But it's fascinating what she can do and why. The brain develops back to front. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to tell you this. After that break, we took another break an hour later, and I did the reverse. I put this on the wall with 10 other pictures. And I went to her and said, could you go point to the letters that go, ah? And she was able to take the sound and find the symbol. So one mimics reading, one mimics writing. If I show her this and the sound pops out of her mouth, that's what a good reader has to do. See a symbol, sound pops out. If I have this on a wall, and she's able to hear the sound and find the symbol, that's what a writer has to do. Here's the sound I need, what can I use to put it down? So it's a stepping stone to what later would be the exact process that kills a lot of our upper grade learners, which is they see a symbol, they don't even see the symbol. And if you force them to notice it is a symbol, they don't have a clue what it says. Or if they hear a sound they need, they don't know what their options are to put it down on paper. Now, the brain develops back to front. The higher level processing executive functioning center is the last to develop. The earlier developing area is the social, emotional, affective learning domain. The part of their brain that lets them know that it's sad when no one will play with them, or it's the part of their brain that lets them know that they want to be the line leader. It's the earlier developing part of the brain that actually functions at an expert level by the time they're in kinder. It's the part of the brain that, if you're a parent, lets you hear at your table everything about who got in trouble, who the line leader is, who the line leader was, who the line leader used to be before they got fired, who the next line leader is going to get to be, and who can't have peanuts, and who all the stuff they can tell you, but they can't tell you what they did in science. That's the stuff stored in the social emotional domain. So that's the part of the brain that is already ripe and it's ready to go. Now, all we did was we cheated. We took advantage of brain plasticity because we wrapped up a skill that is supposed to be processed in the higher level executive processing center, but we cloaked it with a social emotional disguise. And that let this part of the brain trigger and engage, which means that's where it was taken in, that's where it was stored, and it's where she retrieved it. I know she retrieved it from there because it came back with all the pieces that I had put into it, which was, ah. She was thinking a feeling. She was thinking they were in love. And out came the sound embedded within that feeling. She didn't say, oh, I believe that was the awe sound. I think the examples you used were awesome, August, and awful, if I'm correct. That would have been her retrieving it from her higher level executive processing center, and that part isn't at all ready to go. She never would have even tuned in to give me the ah had she not had a need to know. Because I'm sure for those 3 hours, I sounded like blah, 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 like an ELL kid, like a little guy who doesn't speak English must feel like you sound. How does he get the need to know? Because you did something bizarre, and it made him perk up to look. And in that little bit of a moment, you use that high concentration level to just give him a skill non-consciously. Not teach it, give it. And that's the power that lies in this brain plasticity. Because when she's ready to plug it in, what we've done is we've given both kids a key. The difference is Johnny knows what to do with his key. Lulu just gets to have it, to hold it, to use it, to play with it. It's on a buffet. And these skills really are best served on a buffet because you don't know who needs what until they do. And it doesn't make sense to chop them up into 3 grade level years. The more they bring to the table, every extra piece they have is one more thing they can write about their mouse with or pick up a book and read about their mouse with. So the more they have, the more they take away, and the faster they can get even more than they had to start with. So we want to make sure that we're not giving things to some kids and holding them back from others if we have a way to give them to everybody, and then let them decide developmentally when they're ready to plug it in and use it. This is how we can kind of transform these skills on a non-conscious level so that we're not having to teach, but we can just let them be given as we go through the day. And they see, which they will, these roadblocks where letters and sounds aren't doing what they should. So while they're, let's say, doing that better alphabet, if it's early grade level, they're also getting these things called secrets. So they're just building up this base as they go. For upper grade kids, you just toss them out as you need to. And it literally is like a buffet access. Now, we tell stories because stories are just one of the easiest way to activate the emotional centers in the brain. So if we're trying to trigger an area that has no business involving itself in this skill, then the easiest way to do that is to infuse some emotional or social connection. And stories do that for us. So it's a quick, easy way to take advantage of these loopholes for learning and cover a lot of ground quickly. Multi-sensory instruction is another way, and it kind of already came out in the way I showed how she went, ah, because what fires together is wired together in the brain. Another way to say that is what's used together is fused together in the brain. She had her head tilt, she had her body twist, she had her vocal gesture. It was all together the way she expressed the feeling of being in love. It's what she heard me do. So it comes back intact. She doesn't have to think about doing all those things. It's a pulled together piece to retrieve that sound. And I think, by the way, that includes a see it, a say it, and a do it. So I like to use this example for that. This is, and I'm going to tell you how I said it because I want to show you how one of my little non-English speakers would do it. And then I'm going to let you see these teachers from Seattle. There's a secret that I used to tell like this. E-R-I-R-U-R love to go driving in cars, but they're terrible, awful, horrible, no good drivers, and they always have to slam on the brakes and go, Arr! Now, I had a little guy who came over from Mexico. He was in our country a couple weeks, and I think this was first grade. And here's how he would tell it. Now, he used no real words at all, none, not even one, but he got to the sound, which was kind of awesome. Just kind of awesome that he could get there. In his head, he was meaningfully thinking through words, I'm sure, in Spanish, because obviously he figured out what the sound was and he was demonstrating it perfectly. He just didn't know in the English he needed to. So he took the auditory route. If we look at that slide again, he took the route that was the auditory path. He wasn't using English to explain the meaning. He was playing a song that he didn't know the words to, but he could sing along, and he got the gist of where it was headed, which was why he had the emotion behind the song. Now, one teacher said to me, well, on that note, we gave him a path home. All these are pathways home. See it, say it, do it. Some boys would get in trouble because when they would do this, they would slide across my room and go, Arr! And they would just kick everybody in sight. Now, they got the sound. They also got a behavior ticket. But they got the sound. So that's what they would have been, the boys that would have been kicking everything in sight on a good day anyway. So it was one of those things, you can't beat them, join them. Give them something where they can use that to actually retrieve the skill. I mean, not that they should be kicking people, but you know what I mean. So you got to capture kids where they are, and you don't know who's going to need what route to get back home. So the more routes you offer them to get home, the more likely they're going to find the one that they need. Most kids can take multiple routes home to a skill. Some kids can't. Angel couldn't take some routes because he doesn't understand English. So the power of that vocal expression, the way that you toss it out with an auditory, that anything that's out of the norm where he can kind of take that path and follow his way home is the key. Now, the reason that I wanted to mention him specifically is one teacher had said, well, wouldn't you think it would be better to work on vocabulary first before you teach him to read words he doesn't even know what they mean? Absolutely, vocabulary is the key. But here's the neat part. I didn't have to pick or choose. I got instructional density. We're going to work on vocabulary. First of all, I can pinpoint exactly what I need to work on because I know he knows what's going on in this story or he wouldn't have given me this wonderfully heartfelt, he got that these cars were going to crash. He was probably in his head thinking, coches, crash, I don't know the Spanish part for it, but in his head, he was probably telling a story. So I know exactly what parts of vocabulary to pinpoint because I know he understands what this means. He just doesn't have the expression for it yet in English. But I don't have to say to him, I can't teach you to read until you learn that first. Because by the time we do all that, he may be in second, third grade. That's too late. How's he going to go to college if he doesn't even start learning how to read until a grade level where the teachers don't know how to teach reading at that point because that's not their focus. Certainly not what the bulk of their day is going to be spent doing. So he's going to be behind the 8 ball before he even starts. If I have a way to give him both, if he can actually learn to read it while he's learning what it means, why would I not? That's the beauty of non-conscious learning. That's where you learn without even meaning to. Like that little girl playing with her mom's phone. She was not trying to learn the AUAW sound. It just happened. She's got it now. It's this little key. And if we were to keep showing and modeling what it was, at some point she would go, oh, I get it. The ones that are in love are the ones in the word. Guess I get it. When she's developmentally ready to connect the dots, she already owns it. But the beauty of a key is she doesn't have to do that with every new key. So if I've taught 3 secrets, 4 secrets, 5 secrets, once she gets these are the keys that unlock those words, she's already got them all. She hits the ground running. She just has to make that connection once. Developmentally, she has to see this is that. Once that's made, we've actually given her skills before she was ready to learn them. If we waited until she was ready to use them, that could be 2nd grade, 3rd grade. That's too long. Kids that need the most incubation time get the least because they're not ready for skills until much later than the higher kids. So letting these things kind of stew just changes the whole way that kids have to work with text. Now these teachers are going to demonstrate the way they toss out this secret because you'll see when you download these, you can tell them any way you want to as long as the goal is they get that sound and they know what makes it.
ER, IR, and UR love to go riding in cars, but they are terrible, awful, horrible, no good drivers. They don't even have driver's licenses, and they always have to slam on the brakes and say,
Love her face. Now this is that backdoor delivery system, this accelerating access to something that kids need yesterday. They need as much as they can bring to the table. We read and write across the instructional day, and the more they bring to the table, the maximum instructional density they take away. If all they bring to the table are a couple letter sounds, you can't do much. So all that time, we haven't really taken the most out of it, that if they bring more to really more fully partake with those activities, they can actually take away what our intention was when we planned these rich literacy experiences that are woven throughout everything. Now, I want to tell you, I'm going to tell you the secret to get to a bigger point, but there are these things in our alphabet, they're called the vowels. They're the superhero vowels. We have actual superheroes in our classroom. They live here, they sleep here, they are the vowels. They have a power no other letter in the alphabet has. They can say their name, which all the vowels are very jealous of because they can't do that, and they wish they could. No, not all the vowels. All the letters are very jealous of. So the vowels are like the heroes of the alphabet. Everybody loves them. So they have to disguise themselves so they're not recognized. Like Clark Kent, Superman. So they have these little short and lazy disguises just to fill you in quickly. Like you will pretend not to listen. He'll sit in the back of the class. Every time the teacher calls on him, he'll go, and that's his short and lazy sound because no one would suspect superhero you wouldn't pay attention. Short E sticks an old lady bun on her head and some glasses, and she likes to walk around and interrupt conversations and pretend she can't hear. What'd you say? And that's her short and lazy sound. Now, speech pathologists will work for a very long time on things like lip position, tongue position, sounds like, as in these words. So much easier to give a dramatic action that just lands them smack in the sound, because then you cut out what are their weakest areas, which are auditory processing, articulation, even just paying attention long enough to notice what your mouth might be doing, which, by the way, doesn't change much. Not a lot of clues to be gotten from that. So vowels can often be so difficult, they'll be put on the back burner to be taught last because of developmental readiness. You can't read or write anything without a vowel. You can't read or write a single word without a vowel. So how much value are you getting out of the reading and writing you're doing all day long if kids don't have those right from the get-go? That's where we do things backward from the developmental end, the front door, as opposed to the perfect world where if we didn't have to follow those rules, what would actually make the most sense? And again, with the brain science, we're not teaching vowels. We're giving them. So you could do it in a 1-minute setting with a 4-year-old because you're not working on fine-tuning sounds. You're going around their weak areas by going through the back door, this dramatic action. Now, having said that, here's the guy I want to talk about. I didn't tell you all the vowels. You'll see it on your slide. You can watch me do the rest of them. I want to get to a bigger point. This is Sneaky Y. He found out about these vowels, and oh, was he ever mad. He was so angry because he hated his sound. And when he found out these vowels had a power to say their name, he decided he was going to be sneaky. So he snuck into the closets of Superhero E and Superhero I, and he took one of each of their capes, which is where their powers lie. So now, whenever he is at the end of a word and he doesn't think anyone's looking, he will always be wearing either his E or his I cape so that he can use their superpowers to make their sound. Like Mom E, Dad E, Candy, Ska I, July. But when he's at the beginning, he'll do what any good line leader would, which is to behave. He'll do just what he should. He'll stand up tall and straight and do what he's supposed to. Yeah, yeah, yellow, yes, you, yak, yeah, yeah, yeah. But when he's at the end, he will always be sneaky, and he will always be wearing either his E or his I cape. Now, if you're wondering, but what about words like today, or like they, or play? That's not E or I sound at the end. And you're right, that's not. They, E-Y, A-Y, that's not sneaky Y, that's E-Y, A-Y. And they are just too cool, like Fonzie, which if you're under 30, you don't have a clue who he is. So this teacher is going to help you know who he is. This is actually a teacher from that group that went off for 4 months and used sets and costumes to kind of recreate things. He's going to make sure you understand who Fonzie is so that if you're young, you'll know.
A-Y and E-Y. These letters are just too cool. So, with thumbs up and their coolest voices, they say,
Hey. Hey.
I love how deep his voice is with that. Now, this gives kids best betting odds for Las Vegas. You know, kids know if I'm going to smack Susie over the head, I'm not dumb enough to do it when I'm the line leader. When I'm the line leader, I'm going to look like every other perfect little line leader in the world. I'm going to wait till I'm the caboose. That's where I've got some flexibility and I'm less likely to get caught. So we're not teaching kids something they don't already know. We're just aligning something that's brand new, a skill. Positional sounds of Y falls on the plate of 2nd grade. You couldn't get through a first day of kindergarten without seeing that Y splattered all across your room, and you're expecting it to just go, yeah. And it doesn't. It's on 2nd grade's plate because it's hard, but it's not hard when you think about it the way kids think about behavior. They know if they're going to be sneaky, do it at the end. That's where you're going to get away with it. Don't be dumb enough to do it up here where everybody's watching you. So arming kids with that insight means they can see words they've never laid eyes on before and bring to those words the best betting odds for Las Vegas. So they can roll up their sleeves and make the best call on what sound is best to try for that Y that's most likely successful. The alternative to that is sight words, because that's what we go to when we can't read something. And we can't read a lot in kindergarten and 1st grade specifically. And if you're in an upper grade kids get just band-aided with sight words because sight words take up the slack for all the holes of reading that they don't have. Sight words, if you memorize one sight word, the prize that you get at the end of the day is you get one sight word. That's it. You memorize one sight word, you get one sight word. If you know a secret, if you have a tool, you get hundreds of words. So there's where the real power lies, is if you understand best betting odds for Las Vegas when it comes to a Y and what most likely sound to try, you can look at words you've never laid eyes on before, and you can work with it. And that's an incredible thing when you look at being able to give that to a 5-year-old instead of a 2nd grader. Because by 2nd grade, the only kids who need that are kids who they can already read. I mean, the kids who can read in 2nd grade don't need to know what to do with Y, because they can. And the kids who don't still don't understand, because it's so confusing if you think about it as a skill instead of lining it with what already makes sense. Stanford University did a brain study on sight words to look and see the difference between how kids learn words and what would offer the best spark in the brain as far as deeper retention for use and less likely to fall away in the summer slide. Teaching students to sound out the word cat obviously is going to spark far more optimal brain capacity or brain circuitry than instructing them to memorize it. But that also goes for words like these. The problem is if you're in an early grade and all you know are individual letter sounds, or maybe you're in 1st grade and you've covered your th and your sh and your ch or whatever little part of the code you get to teach, every word looks like a sight word. Ha would be ha'awa. She would be saha'i. Thee would be taha'i. So without having a way to account for what letters do when they don't do what they should, you have to almost memorize the world, or so it can feel. But if you own a tool, it changes the entire way kids can look at text. And that, again, is maximum instructional density. You know, we want them to be able to play with things simultaneously, not have to spend time memorizing, and then have no time to actually work on the reading. That study is actually very fascinating. There's a link to it in this. Now, the best way to see this in real action is to look at this writing. I'm going to show you a couple things. These are initial samples, and again, you know, grade isn't really specific. I mean, this is kinder, but you can apply what I'm about to show you to every grade level all the way through high school. These are just to show you what kids had under their belt from low, medium to high. They were told to draw something and then write what it was, and the only one that actually could come up with some letters was this one. This one's a little more advanced than that one, so I just kind of scaled them on a bell curve. This is 1 month in, and I included these to show you the power of using that better alphabet, that muscle memory route to these individual letters and sounds. And I don't even know if I mentioned that it was muscle memory before, but that is the route that we're taking. That plus 3 secrets, 4 secrets, 5 secrets, 6 secrets. 1 month in, that's a lot of ammunition to bring to the table when you're going to sit down and write something. A lot more than a letter of the week, where you might have a K, R, D, C. I was at one school, they didn't start doing letter of the week until 9 weeks in, so I went there in the 12th week, and so far they had a B, D, and a K. 12 weeks into school and they have a B. I don't know what you're supposed to write with a B, D, and a K. Personally, I couldn't come up with anything. I thought, at least throw them a vowel. Give them something to work with, because you can't do anything with 3 letters. And when I said, have y'all been reading and writing, since they've been in school? Oh yeah, we read and write every day. It's like, with what? With what do they do it with? I mean, now I'm not saying that that's not good to still read and write, even if you don't have anything to read and write with. It's still better than being locked in a closet. But having something that allows you to partake in what's going on means you get to walk away with a little more than you had to start with. If you're just sitting there watching things happen, you're getting exposure. But that's not the same as the experience that you get when you can actually kind of sink your teeth into it and play with it a little bit as well. So they were given in the fall on the board. They had to come up with what they wanted to say. This was around end of September. School started Labor Day. So this one wrote, in the fall, I like apps. Now, we had been talking and reading books about fall, so they had lots of ideas. In the fall, I like to pick pucks. This is a higher one. In the fall, I like to make pumpkin pie, P-Y, sneaky Y at the end. Apparently, she likes that better than I. Now, I just like that they had enough to pull whatever they could. They may not have all their letters or all their sounds, but if they've got 14 letters and 4 secrets, that's a lot of stuff to do what I'm going to be doing with them every day anyway. So I'm getting that maximum instructional density. I love this one the most. In the fall, I like to go to trick-or-tridine, except she obviously meant trick-or-treating. I read it as trick-or-tridine because as an adult reader, we see a Y in the middle of a syllable. It's usually going to say I. But I know what she meant. She meant trick-or-treating. And she was able to muster that up and put it down. And that's awesome since she can't even make a Y. I mean, that's the fascinating part. She can't even draw a Y, and she knew, by darn it, she wanted to say trick-or-treating. That's what was going to anchor her to this writing. If she could say what she really wanted. And what she wanted to say was a really hard word. But you can kind of tell where it came from, sneaky Y. There's that I accidentally taught the O-O too early because somebody brought cookies in. So we were doing a shared writing activity, and so I was helping them try to figure out the secret for cookies. And I shouldn't have done that because that word too haunted me for a very long time, because every time they went to write two, they didn't go for the most likely way to spell it. They'd head for that one until they got more text experience. And then they realized it was this one more likely. But I love what she could show me. She could kind of pull and just build with. And those same things can be taken apart for reading, because writing is the best window into the mind of a reader. Writing is just an x-ray of what's in a reader's toolkit. So you can really see it. Now this is end of the year, which, as impressive as that may look, let's look at one close-up that's on the average level. I had dolphin. I live in the deep blue sea. They're octopus, they're sharks, but I could kill them with my nose. I can camouflage, so when sharks swim by me, they cannot see me. There are coral too. I could play all day. There's no place like home. Now, I love, first of all, that a kid that would take a leap to write the word camouflage spells the word they, T-H-A-Y. I'm not saying I like that it's wrong. I'm saying, first of all, I know how he got a Y. You probably do too. He was thinking A. He just didn't know. He doesn't have enough reading experience yet because he's only 5. He hasn't read enough to know which one's right. So as a writer, it's a crapshoot. As a reader, though, that tells me he could crack hundreds of words. That's the key. That's the key. He owns the V and he owns the A, and there's no other logical way he could have put that together unless he owned those building blocks, which means now he can take those and use them to crack 1,000 other words. But I love that he wrote camouflage and he couldn't spell the word they. I also love that he couldn't spell the words, I shouldn't say I love it. I would love him to spell them correctly, but I love the power. He obviously is not reading a lot at home yet. Most kids that even write at all in kinder are kids who've been read to at home, because that's how they don't have skills yet. They don't have the code yet. It's going to be divvied up over 3 years. So the only kids that are writing words in kinder are kids who've been read to enough at home that they can remember what some words look like. They're not building from whole cloth because they don't have anything to build with. So I liked that a kid who obviously has not been read to enough to know what the word see looks like felt powerful enough to put down the word camouflage. He had some stuff he, by darn it, wanted to get out and say. And all those tools are so much easier applied as a reader. Writing's much harder, really, because they have to put things together and make calls on things that they don't know the odds for. Like EY, AY, I don't know, I'll just pick one. But a reader doesn't have to do that. They got the sound, they just see it, make the sound. And of course, the more they can read, the more they will read. And the more they do read, experience is the far better teacher than I am. So it just compounds in its power with building them up as a reader and as a writer. It just kind of grows and grows and grows and grows. So I love that example. Now this is a lower guy, and I use that term relatively because I would say this could be high for first grade if you're going through the front door. But when I'm going through the back door, I have to compare him to his peers, so he comes out low on the bell curve. He wrote, I had a fun swim, I jump high. I love that he's got sneaky Y, but he's got a little bit of text experience that told him there should be an I in that word. And it's fun too. I had a great time swimming, and now I'm tired. Now, I put this here because he spelled now N-O-U. He was thinking O-U-O-W, play really rough, and someone always gets hurt and goes, ow! But notice flying overhead is superhero O. That's because he is their all-time favorite superhero ever. And if he ever flies by, they will stop dead in their tracks, whatever they're doing, and go, oh, 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 oh. And that's important because kids need a default. They need an if not, then this. Because we've got words like slow, blow, flow, glow. They need to think the way the brain thinks, which is here's the most likely, if not, here's where I go. Now, he picked the wrong one for the word now, but I know exactly what he meant to say. He just didn't know which one was which, so he picked one. But what I really love is the great, the way he spelled the word great. There's no way to explain why he did that unless he owned a tool that told him what that E was going to do to that vowel. He did not see that, though, as a silent E. He saw it as Mommy E. And he knows Mommy E will tell any letter that is one letter away from herself, you say your name, and by darn it, she will, because I'll get a hold of her and make her if she's not listening, because I'm close enough, I can do it too, I'm right here. Now, if Mommy's not there, that vowel gets to be short and lazy, just like, so it would have been, for instance, gr-at. But if you want that word to be great, if you want that A to stand up tall and straight and say his name, you better make sure Mommy's there. If Mommy's not there, the vowel's going to be short and lazy, just like you'd be if your mom weren't right there, one letter away, to make sure you do what you should. Now, Mommy might be there, but she could be 2 letters away. And if she's 2 letters away, she can yell and scream all she wants, but her little arms are just not long enough to reach over 2 whole heads to get a hold of you and make you do what you said, so you keep getting to be lazy and I can't do anything, but when we get home, I darn well I'm going to. Kids understand if Mom's there, I got to do it. If Mom's not there, I don't. And if Mom's there, but she's too far away to get me, then I have some lag time before I have to shape up. So we're not teaching them anything new, and yet this is a complex skill. This is, vowel, consonant, consonant, vowel, open syllable, closed syllable, dictating whether vowel is long or short. I've got 4th grade teachers struggling with that, especially when there's no E, because sometimes Mommy's just got to get out of the house. She can't take it anymore. She just needs some time. And when she's got to get out of the house, she'll just put a babysitter in charge. So boys and girls, if you see any vowel that is 1 letter away from another vowel, it's a babysitter. It's going to tell that vowel, you say your name. And just like you got to listen to Mom, you got to listen to your babysitter. So words like making or motor, it can't just be an E because language doesn't work that way. Not every word ends with a nice little E at the end. So, a sparkly E trick is a great trick, but there's good, better, best with brain-based teaching. Sparkly E has its limitations for 2 reasons. 1, it only covers the E. But 2, you have to teach it first. It's an extra step in the process. I don't know what I would do if I were in a real world and something sparkled at me. It probably wouldn't make me say my name. I would probably just stare at it sparkling. And then I wouldn't say anything because I'd be so mesmerized by all the sparkles. So if I'm supposed to know that that sparkly E is going to make me do something, you have to teach me that first. And I might be the kind of kid you got to teach it to a lot. You might have to teach it to me every day for a week. And by the time I finally understand what you want me to do with sparkly E, then I can apply it to figure out how to read and write words. Why take the step? Give them something, align with something that already drives their behavior on a daily basis. That way you don't have to teach them what to do if Mom's there. I know what I got to do if she's there. And if the babysitter's there, I got to do it too. Either way, I got to do it. Now, if she's too far away, I don't have to. So that's where you just save a ton of time, because you can say that to a group of low-reading 5th graders looking at multisyllabic words and help them make the best betting call on what sound to make for a vowel by just looking ahead to see if there's a mom or a babysitter. That is such an incredible, and I've worked with 4th and 5th graders who literally had no clue. They had no trigger point to know whether a vowel's long or short. It was a random crapshoot. They just try both. It's incredible to see how easy we can make things that are just taking years of time for kids to grasp, and they're not grasping them. Now, I see that I am actually supposed to be, I was hoping that I was on time, and I'm not. So here's what I'm going to say is these stories, or any stories you tell, do act as a memory-holding template. So if you can take advantage of that, that is something that's such a much-needed framework for memory construction. And the whole kind of focus of this, and I'm going to scoot to this last slide because I really want to kind of mention this part here, and you'll be able to see more on your PowerPoint when you look at it. But when we can take content that is abstract and meaningless, and we can move it to something that is engaging to learners, then we get to take advantage of the emotional connection that actually drives learning. And Dr. Imordino Yang is an incredible pioneer in this effort, looking at things like math, algebra, science, things that are, for the table of elements, things that are very difficult for learners to digest. I would argue the code is probably the most critical because it leads to their ability to do the things that we would be doing with algebra and science. But emotion can guide learning. So if you can attach meaning to things that otherwise would have none and tap into those emotional centers that drive learners need to know, then your work is really done for you 3/4 of the way. And it shifts everything with regard to how you put things out and how kids take it in. And it bridges this gap. If we target phonics skill instruction specifically to the affective learning domain, we make phonics make sense, but not just to students, to teachers too. Because teachers need to have an easy way to own what's in the box so that they can think outside of it when things don't do what they should. And you can't think outside of the box if you don't know what's in it. You have to know what's in it, and the teachers need to know it as easily as the kids, and they need a backdoor route that's just as quick. And that's really where the true magic of the brain science lies, is when we can give kids and teachers the skill sets they need. And it's fast and it's easy, and it makes sense so they can play with it and add the things they're already doing that are powerful as teachers. So I don't know how time got away from me. I apologize that I went over, and you are able to dig even deeper and go through even more on your own as you download this. So thank you so much. You were so patient to sit for so long. Thank you.